Testing. Testing, testing. Oh.
Good morning. I'm Rev Doege, and I'll be serving as your worship associate today. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Savannah. Our minister, Rev Lisa Doege, is our worship leader this morning. Our worship, religious education, and covenant group theme for January is the practice of story. Here at the UU Church in Savannah, we're building a diverse, multicultural, and beloved community. We celebrate the presence and participation of people of all races, genders, sexual orientations, abilities, and ethnic and national origins. We warmly welcome you on YouTube and on site, whoever you know yourself to be and wherever you are on your journey. If you're visiting with us this morning and you would like to introduce yourself, please raise your hand and Tish will bring a microphone. As part of our commitment to accessibility, we use microphones whenever anyone speaks so that everyone in the sanctuary and those watching on YouTube can hear. Are there any visitors on that side of the aisle? Any visitors on this side of the aisle? Okay. If you're looking for a new faith community, we encourage you to visit several times to get a feel for our worship style and our approach to matters of religion and faith. It's good to have you all with us. Please join us in Ron Hall for refreshments following the service. You can find Ron Hall by going out these doors here, into the courtyard, and then straight into Ron Hall, or you can go out the front door, come around, come in through the gate, make a left, or ask the ushers for help. After the children's story and after the offering, we sing a short response. The lyrics are printed in the order of service. There are 2 cards in the pew back in front of you to help us gather information for the good of our community. Use the QR code on the rainbow chalice to sign up for our newsletter and to receive a welcome letter from our minister, or if you prefer, fill the card out by hand. Church announcements are mailed to members and friends on Tuesdays and Fridays. Check your email for complete details about the following. The Gino Castillo Trio will present an Afro-Cuban jazz concert here in the sanctuary this afternoon at 3 p.m. Tickets are $30 at the door, and a reception will follow in Ron Hall. There will be a new covenant group organizational meeting January 19th at 12:30. The Martin Luther King Jr. Parade on January 20th is from 10 a.m. till noon, followed by our MLK Day concert at 2 p.m. in our sanctuary. Details for the parade will be in this coming Tuesday's e-blast. The Veganuary Congregational Challenge to try a plant-based diet continues. We now have a sign-up sheet for the January 6th vegan potluck. See the blast for its link to sign up, the pledge, recipes, and watch for an information video. Everyone is invited to Refugia Faith, Ecological Civilization and Gifts of the Faith Communities, a lecture by Deborah Rienstra on Saturday, February 1st. With the lighting of our chalice, symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith, we enter into sacred time. Our chalice lighter this morning is Luke. As Luke lights the chalice, let us contemplate the sacred flame, symbol of our UU faith. The light that fills the cracks of our wounds, that warms our hearts. The light that reflects the love that supports us. The light that beckons us and ignites our flame within, inviting us to share our gifts and talents with the world.
Stories have to be told or they die. And when they die, we can't remember who we are or why we're here. We tell ourselves stories in order to live. Story, as it turns out, was crucial to our evolution, more so than opposable thumbs. Opposable thumbs let us hang on. Stories told us what to hang on to. And still today, on the brink of so much that is powerless, so much that is possibility-laden, the stories we tell, the stories we listen for, the stories we listen to tell us what to hang on to. Come, let us worship together. Will you please rise in spirit or in body for our hymn number 346, Come Sing a Song, in the gray hymnal. Different microphone. It's a little tough to manage. All right. Our story this morning is called I Am a Story. I am a story I was told around campfires, then painted on cave walls. I was carved onto clay tablets and told in pictures. I was written on papyrus and printed with ink and wood blocks. then woven into tapestries, and copied into big books to illuminate minds. I was printed and bound, then acted out on stage. I was read in private libraries, then in public libraries open to everyone, and in places you'd never imagined. There's a library in a bus, a library on the back of a burro, a library in a vending machine, on a camel. This one looks like it's in a closet, on a ship, a free little library. We've got one of those outside the church office door, and a library on the back of an elephant. Lots of ways of getting stories to the people who want them. I made people frightened, excited, sad, happy. I was censored, banned, and burned, but did not die. Sometimes people are afraid of stories, so they try to stop other people from reading them. I've inspired millions. I can go with you everywhere. They're carrying their books, they're carrying their phones, they're reading their stories wherever they're at. And I will live forever. I am a story. Thank you for being good listeners. Luke and Francis are going to help out today in RE, and we will sing you on your way.
Long before the internet, before television, there was a tradition in the rural areas of the province of Quebec. In the vestibule of many homes, there was the banc de quêteux, or beggar's bench, also considered the storyteller's bench. A cold winter's eve, a thick white blanket dulling the sounds outside, the wind swirling the snowflakes, then a loud knock on the door. The visitor, weary from walking miles in the deep snow, would be ensconced in front of the fire and given a hot meal to warm his bones. The family would be regaled with tales from villages near and afar, perhaps news of a friend or distant relative. The children, captivated by the strange man in old tattered clothes and holey socks, were up past their bedtime. When the family retired, blankets and pillows would be placed on the bench and the storyteller would sleep there. In the morning, he would move on. We repaid the generosity of those storytellers with food and a bed for the night. Well, in a few minutes, we'll hear stories from members of our congregation. Let us repay their generosity through our financial support of the church. To donate via debit or credit card, please use the QR code on the back of the order of service or go to uusavannah.org and click on the donate button. Mailed checks are also welcome. The morning offering will now be gratefully received. we have a joy, sorrow from Barbara. This is my last service at this church I love. Joy and I will rejoin my family in Louisville, Kentucky. Thank you for the love. And I have a sorrow that I'm sure we're all feeling, and that is the wildfires in LA. It's just appalling. So, let us hold all our joys and sorrows, spoken and unspoken, in our hearts as we join together in the responsive reading found in your order of service. Sorrow is everywhere,
yet joy is reborn.
As we mourn together,
So we celebrate together,
and offer thanks.
that we are not alone.
So may it be now and in all the days to come.
That won't be too loud for us. Trying to get a little away from the cords. Don't want to blow anybody away. So the first time I heard this song was actually in person. Strangely enough, for those of you who know me, it seems rather odd to admit that I was not always a Brandi Carlile fan. It's kind of like going to confessional to say that. Until I saw her in person. I saw her, she opened for Pink, and I kind of fell in love with her then. I came over to the bright side, and heard her sing The Story, and thought it was one of the most well-written, most beautiful songs. And so when David told me that the theme today was stories, I thought, well, how perfect. And I tried it playing it, I tried it with guitar, I tried it with a background track, and for some reason, none of it resonated with me like it did when I just sang it a cappella. So that's how you're going to hear it today, because I thought that you really got to feel the lyric of it, and you got to really hear the story of it. So that's how I'm going to deliver it today. All of these lines across my face tell you the story of who I am. So many stories of where I've been and how I got to where I am. But these stories don't mean anything when you've got no one to tell them to. It's true. I was made for you. I climbed across the mountain tops, swam all across the ocean blue. I crossed all the lines and I broke all the rules. But baby, I broke them all for you. Oh, because even when I was flat broke, you made me feel like $1,000,000. Yes, it's true. I was made for you. You see, the smile that's on my mouth is hiding the words that don't come out. All of my friends who think that I'm blessed, they don't know my head is a mess. No, they don't know who I really am, and they don't know what I've been through like you do. And I was made for you. my face, tell you the story of who I am. So many stories of where I've been and how I got to where I am. Oh, but these stories don't mean anything when you've got no one to tell them to is true. I was made for you. Oh yeah, well it's true. I was made for you.
Let us enter into a spirit of meditation. In the beginning, once upon a time, long ago in a galaxy far, far away, so our stories began, and so they begin again and again and again. As long ago as the Great Depression or the me decade or last week, as far away as the old country or Atlanta or in the home we even now occupy. And though it is true that in the original beginning someone else chose the characters, the setting, the plot, still it is also true that we have long since taken over the writing of our stories. And the reader, I married him, the happily ever after, the she opened the door wide and let him into her life again, the oh, Auntie Em, I am so glad to be home again, the he found his supper waiting for him and it was still hot, the God bless us everyone, all these are ours to write our way to. Never knowing which in the end will be the conclusion of our life's story. Still these and countless other final lines are ours to live our ways toward. With deliberation and a willingness to be surprised, with determination and an openness to what may come, with an eagerness to know how the next chapter unfolds, and faith in our own telling. The stories of our lives are the stuff of masterpieces. Amen.
The fruits of any culture lie in the tales they weave, giving their inspiration without trying to deceive. The tale that tells of courage invites us to be brave. The tale that tells of waste shows the reckless how to save. The tale that tells of consequence brings warnings to the wise. The tale that asks us questions urges solutions we devise. The tale that speaks of true love asks our hearts to open wide. The tale that tells of victories restores our human pride. When these truths are woven with the greatest of human care, the lessons we can harvest may be answers to our prayers. Those who weave the stories are an inspiration to humankind, harvesting the fruits of wisdom and offering food for the mind. That was by Jamie Sams.
Our second reading this morning from Unitarian Universalist minister Rev Emily Gage, who many of you heard when she preached at our installation service here in October. In some ways, it could be argued, each one of us is a community or collection of stories. That is, in part, what this month's theme is all about. But we must also ask this question in a broader sense. What does it mean for our congregation to be a community of story? Part of what we do, of course, is listen to one another's stories. We do this in the joys and sorrows portion of our worship service, in informal conversation at coffee hour, or while our kids play. We witness shared celebrations of our stories, whether they be baby dedications or memorial services or other rites of passages. We create narratives of what could be in our shared faith in action gatherings and marches. Sometimes just sharing our story and having it held by others is helpful. Sometimes hearing a story that sounds like yours, but with a different ending, can give you hope. Sometimes listening to someone whose perspective is totally different opens up new worlds and new understanding. In our religious community, we are shaped by the stories we encounter. In our religious community, we create a shared story of who we are and who we may become. Here end the readings. Will you rise in body or spirit for hymn number 318 in the gray hymnal, We Would Be One?
To
Just a quick word about that hymn. I've told you before, if you look at the bottom of the page, it lists the lyricist and the composer of that one, of course, is Sibelius. And we have the same tune to different words. But if you see a little chalice by the name of either the composer or the lyricist, that means it was written by a Unitarian or a Universalist or a Unitarian Universalist. These words were, and in the middle part of the last century, this hymn was the sort of theme hymn of the youth organization of Unitarian Universalists. That's the musical history lesson for today. There are 8 million stories in the hostess city. Here are a few of them. From Joseph Bisserano. It was a very special day for the entire church because it signaled our rebirth. This was 1, the first new member welcoming ceremony, and 2, the first time that the choir and the congregation sang after a very long hiatus caused by the pandemic. I wish it need not have happened in my time, said Frodo. So do I, said Gandalf, and so do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us. I wish that my year as president of the Board of Trustees had coincided with a time of optimism and growth. Instead, it coincided with the second year of the pandemic, when the top priority became holding our community together during a period of unique challenges. The Sunday service on April 17th, 2022, near the end of my term, was when I knew we had come through.
This is from Judy Deinhardt. When we bought the present historic property from the Baptists, they moved into a nondescript building that was not designed as a church and thus lacked pews. They tried to negotiate to buy our pews, but we were not interested. However, we did agree to help them locate some pews and bring them to their building. A few weeks later, some pews free for the taking were located via the internet in a Lutheran church in New City, New York, which is just north of New York City and about 40 miles from my sister's house where I just happened to be visiting. My sister and I were asked to go to the church, take photos of the pews, and more importantly, measure them at several different angles to help Tom Ackerman determine if interlocked, they would fit in his trailer. Once the information was sent and met with satisfaction, the intrepid four, Tom Ackerman, Frank DeBolt, Milton Ron, and Bob Thane, who later were to become known as the Pew Crew, embarked on the journey to New York State, where they disassembled several rows of pews and placed them interlocking like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle onto Tom's trailer. The drive back was treacherous as they traveled through blinding rainstorms. However, the pews were delivered unharmed to the Baptists, and everyone was happy. The Pew Crew became famous in the annals of UUCS history.
From Sandy Mucci, New Year's Day, 2022. I had just arrived in Savannah and decided to see what the UU church was like. After the service, I chatted with David and told him I sang in the New Hampshire choir. He invited me to sing with the choir, even though I would only be here for a couple months. I was so warmly welcomed and included. Participating in the MLK concert was inspiring. I knew I had found a place where I belonged. I am now an official snowbird, and singing in the choir is among my many favorite things about this community.
From Stacy Lazarus. My story is about David Netches. I'd never been in a choir, but David said, "Don't worry," and he determined I was a bass singer. It's been a steep learning curve for me, but the choir has been welcoming, and David's been kind. He has taken my background as a blues rock performer into consideration and had me play guitar and harmonica for everyone on 2 annual Blues Sundays. He's also let me do lead vocals with the choir on a version of the Grateful Dead song, Ripple. Most recently, he arranged a song that I had co-written long ago and performed it himself with the choir band. Thanks, David.
From Dorothy Holmes, a UUCS story of spontaneous compassion. On Sunday, February 2nd, 2020, Kelly Blackmar sang the beautiful hymn, Comfort Me. When she got to the line, Dance with me, oh my soul, grief washed over me as I remembered the last time I danced with my late husband Raymond in Ron Hall in early October 2018. When Ron Cole, Susan Daggett's late husband, heard my muffled sobs, he came to me with just as much spontaneity as when I began to cry. He took my hand, hugged me, comforted me, oh my soul. That was Ron. Sweet, loving, unassuming, genuine, and compassionate.
From Gordon Matthews. 40 years ago, half my lifetime, I found a home in our UU congregation at the invitation of banker Bob Pattison. Reverend Anderson was the first of our 7 ministers, and we were in the Sheftall House. I have stayed engaged during our high and low points, and our church community is the most enduring and valuable anchor of my life in Savannah. I am proud to have helped us buy, sell, and protect our real estate, often under time constraints and without the need for a mortgage. I am grateful for this meaningful opportunity to serve.
From Kevin Ione, there is an ongoing story of an assembly of men, wise elders of our church known as the Old Guys Coffee Group. A merrier band of fellows is not to be found. They meet twice monthly in various Savannah coffee houses to banter and hold forth on their adventures, travel, books, music, local affairs, politics, environment, economics, religion, war, and peace. They bring their experience and sagacity to bear on the world's problems and never break till all these woes have been solved and the responsible parcel of roogs identified, usually in about an hour. And being men, they never talk about their feelings.
This is from Martha Weaver. In 2001, in the time before the renovation, the sanctuary was sagging and the walls were settling. The Buildings and Grounds Committee decided a joist was needed to shore up the foyer, and the only way to get it into position was by snaking it under the sanctuary floor. It was a job for several able bodies, not necessarily young, willing to brave close quarters, mold, and spiders. We met early on that July morning and began pushing the joist through the Harris Street crawl space before dragging it through more than a century of dirt to the area under the foyer. After securing the joist to the foyer floor, the crew, covered in dirt and cobwebs and coughing up dust, climbed out through a hole in the foyer closet. Mission accomplished. Foyer saved by crew members Martha Weaver, Bob Thane, Tom Ackerman, Kirk Cobb, Fred Bliss, and Larry and Bonnie Bergeron.
From Nancy Arterberry. From the time I first visited UU Church of Savannah and was warmly welcomed by Milton Ron, my own story has been shaped and inspired by the people of UUCS. Milton taught me to wear a warm smile even when I didn't feel like it. Louise taught me to be genuine and compassionate. John Idarosa taught me to share a good story and always be willing to help. Philippa inspired me to care deeply for others and stand up for what I believe. Mark teaches me on a daily basis that kindness is more important than anything else. Martha inspires me to be reliable and get her done. And from Milne, I have learned that ideas are seeds to be planted and fertilized. So my personal story is deeply interwoven with the stories of those who have inspired me here at UU Church of Savannah, and for that I am so grateful.
This is also from Nancy Arterberry. One of my most memorable stories is when I applied to be Director of Religious Education back in 1999. I was a newly transplanted Northerner, a lapsed Methodist, on the verge of divorce, and still discovering what Unitarian Universalism was all about. Mike Freeman, a former member, was part of the committee in charge of hiring. As he was walking me through the Sunday school spaces and explained the RE program, he abruptly and randomly asked me the following question: "How do you feel about gay marriage?" Keep in mind, this was 1999, long before gay marriage became legal. To be honest, I hadn't even given much thought to the topic yet. I paused, panicked, and answered, "I'm for it," more from my heart than my brain. Turns out this answer was acceptable. Thank goodness. From this experience, I learned to trust my heart and that I had found a home in Unitarian Universalism.
From Grace Wilson. On a pleasant Sunday morning in early October, we did not file into the pews, but instead circled around the middle of Troop Square for the annual blessing of the pets service. Each and every pet was blessed. Dogs on leashes, photos of cats on phones, dogs on laps, and even a lizard on a shoulder. Each recitation of the blessing created a meditation on how each creature is part of God's creation. All creatures have a place in the choir and are valued not for what you do, but for that you are. And with each blessing, we reinforced that we humans are also unique in all the world and creatures of holiness.
This is from Roxana Lester. Many years ago, when the UUs in Savannah first started the Martin Luther King Jr. concerts, at the end, we crossed our arms and held hands as we swayed and sang, "We Shall Overcome." As my hands folded into the hands of two new African-American friends, I was overwhelmed with emotion and grateful for the connection of the UUs to the greater Savannah community.
When someone learns that I'm pastor of a church, their follow-up questions fall into a couple of predictable patterns. The inquirer either asks demographic and geographic questions. Where is that? How many members do you have? How long has the church been there? Or how long have you been there? Or they ask categorization questions, beginning with, what kind of church is that? Given how small our faith movement is, it is an understandable question. What kind of church is that? Usually, after they grasp that Unitarian Universalism is a denomination, not simply part of our church's name, they ask again, what kind of church is that? I could be wrong, but I think that second asking of the same question is more common in conversations about Unitarian Universalist churches than in conversations about mainstream and even independent Christian denominations. I maintain that the average person on the street has no idea, really, what differentiates Christian denominations one from another, except perhaps for a basic understanding that Catholicism is different from Protestantism. But Baptist, Methodist, Episcopal, Lutheran, Presbyterian, various independent Christian churches, such as we have so many here in Savannah, these feel, at least, like known quantities simply because their names are familiar. Most people have known someone who goes to one of those churches, or they've seen the churches in their neighborhoods, or they grew up in one or belong to one themselves. But most people know they haven't ever heard of a UU church, and they know they've never known anyone who belonged to one. So I hear that question often. You probably do too. What kind of church is that? My answers also follow a few predictable paths, depending on how interested I think the questioner is or how receptive they'll be to really learning about us. Sometimes I leave it at, it's a small denomination on the liberal end of the Protestant spectrum. I may say Unitarian Universalism resulted when the American Unitarian Association merged with the Universalist Church of America in 1961. I may say we don't have a creed. There is no one thing you have to believe in order to be UU, so we have a wide range of theology in our congregations and throughout our association. I may talk about our core values of justice, equity, transformation, pluralism, interdependence, and generosity with love at the center. And I may talk about this specific church, the UU Church of Savannah, telling about the history of this congregation through several iterations, dating back to about 1820 and through nearly a century of partial or complete dormancy until the establishment of this current congregation around 1958, tracing the movements of various groups of Unitarians from meeting location to meeting location, including the construction, occupancy, sale, and eventual repurchase of this sanctuary building, mentioning the Pierpont brothers and other notable ministers, naming a few of our present-day ministries. All of those are valid ways of answering the question about what kind of church this is. It's a Unitarian Universalist church, which means it has a certain wide-ranging theological bent and currently articulates its core values in a particular way. It's a UU church in this city, which means it has a particular demographic makeup and history influenced by the legacy of enslavement. And it's a UU church in 2025 with programming reflective of the values common to the larger UU body in the 21st century. Those are fine answers for the casual inquirer. They are probably similar to the answer you give when asked about your church, our church, this church. But what kind of church is this really? It's a church that weathered a pandemic, that made radical changes to the way it operated in order to keep its members and staff safe, meeting and worshiping remotely and sometimes outdoors, services without choirs, without congregational singing, no coffee hour, social distancing when face-to-face meetings were necessary, all the various changes to community that the pandemic brought to all churches. Changes no one wanted, changes that didn't feel like church, changes that were argued over. It is the kind of church that came through all those changes, those years, not unmarked, but intact. Here for the members who survived those years and those changes, and here for all who have sought it since. It's a church whose members went out of their way, several states out of their way, through stormy weather to be good faith neighbors to another congregation. It's the kind of church where the choir director invites everyone who remarks on the choir to join the choir. Not all of them do, in fact, most of them don't, but all of them remember the invitation. And the ones who do join find a place of meaning and purpose in the choir within the larger community of the congregation. It's the kind of church that invites members to bless the church with their personal passions, musical and otherwise, until it is hard to know which way the blessings flow or from which side they began, congregant blessing congregation or congregation blessing congregant, in an ever-flowing stream. It's the kind of church where deep, worshipful moments draw forth spontaneous expressions of emotion, and where the conventions of stay in one's pew from the opening words through the benediction don't constrain spontaneous gestures of compassion, and the stream of blessing flows through embodied presence. It's the kind of church that calls forth half a lifetime's loyalty, loyalty that comes not just from being part of a congregation, but is deepened through serving that congregation, and the stream of blessings flows through service. It's the kind of church out of which small groups arise, both formal and informal, appearing on the church calendar and convened by word of mouth, old guys being but one of many, for the solving of the world's problems, for the staving off of loneliness and isolation, for support and socialization during the pandemic, for the discussion of books, for the beautifying of our Macon Street curbside in a sustainable way. And the stream of blessings flows in and through small groups that rise up and dissolve and reconstitute themselves according to the needs of congregation members and friends. It's the kind of church whose members care deeply about its physical structures and undertake its upkeep as often through hands-on and on-belly labor as through the raising of funds and hiring of experts. The kind of church that rests quite literally on the efforts of its members. It's the kind of church whose members learn from each other and teach each other every day through their lived example, probably never knowing the effect they have upon one another, never knowing they are part of the ever-flowing stream of blessings, the kind of church in which people's lives are changed through community. It's the kind of church that asks challenging and unexpected, but not random, questions that help its members discover the truth of their hearts. It's the kind of church that sometimes moves worship out of the sanctuary and into the world, even when there aren't public safety concerns, that recognizes on an annual basis our deep connection to the animals we love and to all of creation. The kind of church that helps its members remember and celebrate their existence, not apart from the rest of creation, but as a part of creation. And the stream of blessing flows between and among species, sentient and otherwise. It's the kind of church that knows that this city's, the South's, our country's complicated and shameful legacy of racial injustice is woven into its very being. From its earliest founding, through the wealth of cotton traders, and through its fame tied to a song written by a man who married into an enslaving family. A legacy neither undone by nor yet impervious to the effects of other legacies. The breath of the African American Episcopal community that once owned and worshiped in this very space, intermingled with our own. Our early adoption of the eighth principle, and our ongoing anti-racism work. Knowing that all these strands are part of its DNA, it's the kind of church that produces an annual MLK Day concert, calling us to sit beside our neighbors, sing arm in arm with our neighbors, sing a prayer for the day the reconciling strand will overcome the enslaving strand. The Unitarian Universalist Church of Savannah is that kind of church, the kind that changes lives quietly through nothing more and nothing left than the life of a community, nothing less than the life of a community living its values with love at the center. It is also, it must be said, the kind of church that breaks hearts, that falls out of covenant with some of its members, that allows petty annoyances and squabbles to end friendships, that fails to live fully into values. I know that it is this kind of church too, because one of you sent me a couple sentences about such experiences, though asked me to share only the more positive reflection that was among those Raven and I read this morning. And I know this is that kind of church too, because I've heard some of those stories of resentment, pain, loss, of unkindness and cruelty from some of you privately over these 2.5 years since I arrived. But mostly I know this is that kind of church too, because it is a human institution. And human institutions are always imperfect. And the streams of blessings that run through them are never the only streams that run through them. Streams of bickering and bitterness, of mistakes and misunderstandings, of shortcomings and flawed oversight always run through institutions too. The healthy and continued existence of any institution is largely a matter of which streams are deeper and which ones are protected and fed. All the stories of this congregation matter. And it matters that sometimes we are brave enough to tell and to hear the hard stories. In fact, someday, I don't know when, I'll probably ask you specifically for those hard stories. And I'll find a way to share them in worship that allows us to hear them and learn from them and heal from them without retreating into protective shells or doubling down on attitudes or behaviors that are the core of such stories. For now, however, it is significant that while I didn't ask you for your most painful stories, I also didn't ask you for your best memory of church, for the story you love most about the church or its members. I didn't ask what brought you here or what has kept you here. I asked only for a story about the church or someone in it. And with that one exception, the stories you told were love stories, outright love stories, and love stories disguised as stories about crawl spaces and pew puzzles. Last week, we sang the words, "Disappointment pierced me through, still I kept on loving you." I know this church has pierced you through with disappointment, or will one day if you're too new to have had that happen yet. And still, you've kept on loving it. That's the kind of church this is. The kind where the bonds of love are stronger even than the piercing of disappointment. The kind where surviving and healing from the experiences of bullying and estrangement and falling short of our high ideals is possible because of the experience of love at the center. The kind of church I'm proud to serve. Amen. Will you please rise in body or spirit for our closing hymn, number 107, Now Sing We of the Brave of Old. Though our knowledge is incomplete, our truth partial, and our love imperfect, we believe that new light is ever waiting to break through individual hearts and minds, to enlighten the ways of all, that there is mutual strength and willing cooperation, and that the bonds of love keep open the gates of freedom. Amen.